to me, when we look at like Tom Ellis and what, he did here with, colonialization of the area, are we going to tell his side of the story of what he did, but also the other darker side as well?
Welcome back to the Deep Fryer Podcast. I'm Joe Fries, pleased to be joined today by Penticton City Councillor Isaac Gilbert. He's graciously agreed to come on and tell us a bit about himself. One of the reasons I wanted Isaac on is because he kind of emerged on the political scene here in Penticton a few years ago and has kind of steadily progressed his way up the ladder, and he's now found himself on council, but I don't know a whole heck of a lot about the guy. I thought, so maybe I'll bring you guys along as I get to know Isaac. But we're also, of course, going to talk about his politics, local politics, and some bigger political issues, of course. So first of all, I'm going to let Isaac in on a secret. Earlier this year, I understand there was a Mr. at City Hall who put a Freedom of Information request in for Isaac Gilbert's contract with BC Parks as a park ranger. And it was speculation. Who did it? I'm going to reveal it was me. It was me who did it. And the reason I did is because it was, as I said, I didn't know anything about you. And it was this park ranger thing. And you were always at parks meetings and politicking. I thought, how does this guy have time to be a park ranger? There's got to be something up. But sure enough, the contract's checked out and it's all good. So fill in the blanks for me. 2018, you ran in the election here. But did you come from Penticton? Where did you grow up? Tell us who Isaac Gilbert is in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on here, Joe,
and of course,
in the talk, and for you to get to know me a little bit better and everything like that. And so I'm glad that settled the FOI that came out. That's
I can confirm he's had contracts as a park ranger.
Yeah. So originally I was born and raised in Windsor, Ontario. Yep. That's where my mom and dad still live to this day. Yep. And I came out to BC in 2010 as a working arborist. Yep. And then I ended up leaving that profession and moving on to a park ranger. And I first started in 2014 in EC Manning Park. I did 2 seasons there, and I decided that I really wanted to move and onto a different park system and a different type of, clientele in a way. And Manning Park is the perfect place to learn to be a park ranger. You're there clearing trail, you're in the middle of the wilderness, you're doing overnight backpacking, you're meeting a lot of people from the Lower Mainland. Yep. But I wanted to have a different park system. And so Penticton was one of the 3. I had Revelstoke, Nelson, and Penticton as my top 3 cities to go to. And I put my name in for a transfer, and I moved into Penticton in 2016 to the South Okanagan. And I've been with BC Parks for 9 seasons, and I actually just decided to not do my recall this year. So I won't be a park ranger this year. What is it? It's just the role of council has definitely taken up more time, and it's something that I've really enjoyed and love being a city councillor. Yep. And so I ran in 2018. Definitely came way down in the pack there, and then I ran in the by-election and came second. Yep. And so this time, by the skin of my teeth, I was able to get on to council, and it's been a very enjoyable time. I've loved working with my fellow councillors in there and the staff of the city of Penticton, and I'm super optimistic about the direction that we're moving. Yeah.
Okay, you said you always wanted to get into politics. Like, are we talking, you're the kid in grade 3, sticks his hand up and says, I want to be prime minister? or like you just always wanted to be helping your community?
I think always wanted to help my community. Yeah. I would say, since high school, it's always been like, you're not like as narrowly focused, but I always had to be like, well, how do we make society better? How do we how do we do things? Like, I was very much in the in the mode of like in the arts and kind of like music scene, and you meet a lot of people through that. And I remember always going to this bar in Windsor, Ontario called the Milk Cafe, and my buddy Kirill, who went to school for philosophy and political science, him and I would just be there on a Monday night when jazz is playing in the background and just like spitballing political science and philosophy with one another. And, and you're young, so you don't know how to get involved quite yet. Right. Which I do appreciate, like I don't want to ever, I'm glad I went through work and not a career politician or always been in it. Right. I've worked through being an arborist in the trades and working as a park ranger, and all that, helps accumulate to the experience that I have now going into council. So, so it was probably about in my 20s when I was really more active.
Yeah. So in terms of your politics, it's safe to say you're progressive, but I'm kind of curious where that comes from. You said you're a big thinker, big idea guy, but were your parents political? Did you grow up in a political environment, or did you just tend to lean to progressive views?
Yeah, I think I grew up a bit of a political environment with my family.
Yeah.
Windsor, Ontario is, a big union city.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of like, my household, talking about like when, current governments get in, how that's going to affect the manufacturer. My dad works at Chrysler's. I remember, he was talking to me. He's like, I want to vote for Gore. And we can't vote. But if he's if I was an American and I want to vote for Gore, I want to, but I don't want to because George Bush is going to bring in better industry for, job security. So, so being in that environment and understanding, because, everything's political, right? You can't, divide and say, well, I'm not political. Everything in life is political. There's always some type of politics that are playing. And so I saw it very much in the level of my dad working at Chrysler's and union politics, and that definitely infiltrated the house. And, obviously with my grandparents too. So,
I guess you grew up in an environment where politics was very real and had a very real impact on your life, your day-to-day life.
Yeah, so absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I want to ask you about your political ties. During the at least the last two elections, there was speculation that you were using robocalls. The firm was the NDP's firm, and that the party was somehow backing you and everything else. So let's clear it up once and for all. What are you an NDP member? What is the ties there?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I'll be honest. Like, I have been an NDP member both federally and provincially in the past. I'm currently not an NDP member, and I haven't been for quite some time.
Can you say why not?
Oh yeah, definitely. For me, like, I definitely will say that I lean towards the NDP, right? But I am super critical of the NDP and how they run things, right? I think that's the biggest misconception is that, if you're an NDP member or any party member, right, that the party is going to have some type of influence on you. And that's not true. Like, as a member of a political party, you're the one that actually gets to vote on the policies that the party does, right? It's not the other way around. Like, that's the politicians, the politicians in the legislature get whipped by whatever, government is made of the day, right? And so, currently right now it's the administration of David Eby, right? And so he has his cabinet and they're going to run the way that they're going to run. But on the political party side, you have as a member of being, critical of it. And, to me, why I'm not a member, I just don't feel like being in party politics right now. I've really enjoyed not having that. Like, don't get me wrong, like everyone's partisan, right? No matter what, you can sit there and say like, we have ties to the NDP. It's like, yeah, but I'm not going to, me not being part of the NDP is kind of nicer to be on council because you kind of remove that kind of like stigma or that image to it where and so like I don't go to the conventions, and it's just about my time, right? Like my time personally, I feel that if I really wanted to be in provincial politics and try to go that road as an MLA, then definitely I'm going to pick a party and try to springboard off of that, right? But like that's not what I want to do. Like the thing that I love about municipal politics is that they tend to be more non-partisan and more independent. And, you can look at like who I'm working with on there, I'm definitely on a different spectrum than the rest of the counselors, but I respect and love working with those counselors, right? Even in like Councillor Conez, like, we debate in the chamber back and forth hard with one another. And in the back room, we're pounding and saying, good work out there, right? Like that's the point, right? One of the things that Councillor Conez said to me before we go out there, she says, always have an open mind that your mind might be changed. And, and so I think I really respect that. And I really respect that, Councillor Conez and I can go out there and debate topics and be able to be friends at the end of the day. And so I think that's super important. And, so that's, for me, it's like right now, party politics don't really speak for me. Like, speak to me for me to be really involved in it.
Okay. Thanks for clearing it up. Councillor Conans, for those who don't know, Helena Conans, she ran for the Conservative Party. She's firmly right-wing and proud of it.
Yeah.
Do you have aspirations of running for MLA or MP or something at some point?
At this time, no, not at all. Okay. Right. Yeah. Right now, I'm enjoying, municipal talk. Municipal politics, like you do something, you see those effects right away.
Yeah.
And and we're just more accessible to the public. And that's what I like, right? As someone who, that was my skill of being a park ranger was, how do I go into a situation where I'm doing enforcement with someone? And, the people that we always say that we always want to deal with difficult people in parks because they're the ones that tell us, they wear their heart on the sleeve. They tell us all that they want, right? And those are the people, you want to work with, because usually you can get them on your side, or you might, see their perspective as well better, right? And that's what municipal politics is all about. We have, such a easy, low barrier way for people to come to us and talk to us, compared to if I'm an MLA. You're in Victoria for how many weeks out of the year? And if you ever get cabinet, like you're never seeing your constituents, right? And so it's like that's bigger picture thinking. And that's where I like municipal politics. You kind of get more into the weeds. You see the rubber hit the ground, and you're working more in your community.
The Deep Fryer podcast is presented by the South Okanagan Event Center right here in Penticton. We have a free pair of tickets to give away for every episode this season. Upcoming events include TLC and Shaggy Hot Summer Nights Tour on July 15th. Bonnie Raitt with special guests Royal Wood coming September 22nd, and Skid Row and Buck Cherry on October 10th. Check out our socials, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter for details. Or pick up tickets directly at valleyfirsttix.com.
I'm going to take you back to, this is a council meeting in early February. Council was talking about potentially amending zoning rules and such in the Cherryland, Windsor Avenue area to encourage more housing. And Councillor Gilbert was against that idea. And I'm going to read the quote. This is what he said. He said, quote, "If we're going to talk about heritage and consulting as well, that neighborhood on Windsor Avenue is the former homestead of Tom Ellis, the person who sat there and took part of Penticton away from the Penticton Indian Band. So what type of heritage are we protecting here? Are we protecting colonial heritage in our community, or are we going to move forward on a better reconciliation?" What the heck are you saying there?
Well, I do want to correct that. It was, the reason why I went against that motion was because, for me, the neighborhood charm project came out. I'm all for, ensuring that when multifamily, complexes, commercial and industrial complexes, come to council, that we'd have say on what the character and form looks like. And so when I saw that neighborhood charm project came, to me, it was like, okay, well, we're working on, preserving a certain look of the neighborhood, of character and form of, of housing in that space, right? What was being offered to us was essentially restricting housing, to mainly single family detached homes and maybe duplexes, right? And the reason why I'm against stuff like that is, one, single family detached homes are, they're getting better to be efficient, but they're really hard on the environment because you have four walls exposed. Two, they're really expensive and out of reach for a lot of people. And so to me, we need to be looking at, how do we densify the area? Because for me, in my personal view, I'd rather not have massive towers everywhere like what we see in Vancouver. That's what we have is, there's a term that's always been, talked about, which is called the missing middle, which is essentially, if you're to look at Vancouver, you have like Broadway, we have all these towers, and then everything outside of Broadway is more single family detached homes. So they always have to build up because they don't allow for densification in the single family detached homes. Whereas cities previously in the past, before it became so car centric, was that we used to have neighborhoods called streetcar suburbs, where a streetcar would drop you off in your neighborhood, and your neighborhood would have like a fourplex, a single family detached home, a duplex, an apartment building that's maybe 5 stories, and commercial stuff around there, which allowed for that a lot of people to live in one area, but not feel so overcome by like 30-story towers. So that was when that project came in. I didn't agree with that. To me, we need to have densification of housing to be able to, because we're having a housing shortage. My comment to the reconciliation piece is, like when we're talking about heritage and we're talking about what are we preserving? Well, if we're going to preserve this, are we going to talk about both sides of that story? And I definitely will say that I was a bit heated, because, when you see these projects like trying to restrict housing, we also use things to restrict people, right? We look at the history of the British properties in North Vancouver. The zoning basically said you cannot sell this land to, every race except for white people, right? And so to me, when we look at like Tom Ellis and what, he did here with, colonialization of the area, are we going to tell his side of the story of what he did, but also the other darker side as well, like what he did as well? Like, yes, he gave people work at, gave SEAL members work and on the ranch and everything, but he also was not the nicest guy, right? So if we're going to talk about preserving heritage, are we going to talk about the, what colonialization is on from these houses that are being built and how that's impacted, SEAL people in our community. So,
Okay. During the budget deliberations in March, finally came back a report about your idea about potentially exploring living wage. What was the concept there and what was the result?
Yeah. So living wage essentially is done by a nonprofit organization, or the city can do it as well.
Yeah.
I don't have the nonprofit in my head right now, but I think it's the Campaign for Living Wage for Families, if you look it up.
Okay.
Essentially what it goes through is it looks at, what does it cost to live in a city? So, and this is, what does it cost for 2 parents and 2 kids to be able to afford food, clothing, rent, emergencies, and daycare and childcare within that city.
Okay.
And so that number is then, put forward. And so if the city were to adapt that living wage, so it would make it so that all the workers, so all the public servants for the city, so it's the firefighters, librarians, engineers, all those people make a living wage at the city, right? Which they pretty much do, right? But when a city decides to do that, they also have to expand that out to all the service contractors, right? So, for example, the SOEC would be one where we would, when their contract came up, right? So if we adopted it, there was no grandfather clause. Collective agreements would stay the way that they are. All contracts would stay that way that they are. And so when the contract would come up, depending on what the living wage is at the time, it is a dynamic number. It's not static. It changes depending on, on livability, right? So for example, in 2018, the living wage actually went down in the Lower Mainland because the federal government, the provincial governments brought in $10 a day childcare. And so that reduced the living wage down for families. So that number went down, right? So, when you look into the future, when we have roadworks and we have the SOEC and we have services being done on city-owned land, the city would pay the contractors the money to ensure that all those workers are making a living wage and that they can afford to live in the city of Penticton, right? So it's only those businesses. It wouldn't say that all businesses in Penticton have to have a living wage. What we're saying is we're going to be leaders leaders in our community, ensuring that our workers and the workers who service all of our contracts for the city of Penticton are paid a living wage, and that their families can live here and be able to afford all the necessities in life.
I think where it went into the weeds a bit was, someone had suggested, well, what if the city is buying something from a grocery store and the workers there make minimum wage? Does that grocery store no longer qualify to do business with the city? How does that work? How would that work?
So it wouldn't affect that business, right? Okay. So because it's not a service, right? They're not doing work on city-owned land. The city's buying a product from them, right? Okay. So if the city were to buy a product from a grocery store or whatever contract they have for procurement, those workers are not covered under that. If I were to, hire, Grayback Construction or another construction company to come on and do, work on the road, they would bid on the contract to ensure that their workers are getting paid a living wage. And that's what the city would be paying in that contract. We pay the best one, right? So that's how it would work. So and the other one that came up was about, what about the Peach or the concession stands? Again, that's a different, they're doing work on city land, but they're not doing the work for the city, right? They are running a business out of our facility and they're paying us rent to be there, right? It's a different partnership in that way.
Okay. Before I forget, off the top of your head, what is the living wage in Penticton?
So when they approximately said it was about $22.83, and that was kind of based off the Kelowna number. So there is no calculation, but it's kind of like what they calculated. That's what it would be today, right? So back in 2018, it was, I believe, $19.56 was the living wage.
Both parents would have to make that $22 an hour.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds like a bit of a high bar to meet.
It is a high bar to meet. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. There was a well-publicized dispute between the Penticton Art Gallery and City Council. It had to do with the grant funding. It all got sorted out, but I'm just wondering, and I don't want to rehash it all, but we forgot to mention off the top, you're an improv artist. Yeah. You've said you're an arts guy. It must have been uncomfortable. Well, I don't know if it's fair to say it was uncomfortable, but you found yourself on the opposite side of a very impassioned Paul Crawford. How was that? I mean, you're an arts guy, and suddenly you're on the other side of the table from him, seen to be taking from the arts. Yeah. How did you reckon with that?
At the end of the day, it's, to me was like, he was impassioned, and I agree with that, because I want to see arts to do well, and I do want to see the city push better on, how do you say, being able to promote art. For example, I went back to Windsor with my partner to visit the family this past summer. We went to the Detroit Institute of Art, and one of the things that I thought was really great is you go into like the Dutch Quarter or whatever little quarter that they had their collection, and it would say the city of Detroit on there. And so that the city of Detroit made the investment to buy those artworks to put it into there, right? So, so for me, my stance on that was, I agreed with the decision that we made back in the fall, because that was the best information that we got from it. They were showing surpluses for 2 years, and they had a really good reserve, right? And to me, staff made that recommendation, and I agree with it, because it was the best information that we had. It's unfortunate timing, really, at the end of the day, right? And so for me, it's like, I'm okay with, people who I'm in the community with that support me to come up to me and argue that I'm doing something wrong. That's totally fine. I'm 100% behind that. I've told that to my friends, like, please, like, if you're going to criticize me, do it, right? I don't want you to play favorites there, right? To criticize me. So, to me, it wasn't uncomfortable, because, at the end of the day, like, when I look at the numbers and look at, like, what the city is doing for the arts, I think it is, important. I think we are doing good, right? I think, that funding looks like we cut funding. Well, it is a grant, right? It's not funding. But we are also supplying other services to the art gallery, ensuring that, they're not paying taxes and they're not, leasing the land. So that's, that has value as well. And we're also maintaining the building, and going in there and fixing up things. So I think there is support for it. But if like at the end of the day, if we had numbers with us saying that they needed to have that, then absolutely, right? I think we would have, I would have, voted, let's increase up. But with the numbers that they presented to us,
a lot of people were suggesting that the city, even if it was giving the art gallery its full grant request, it would still be far less than what the city spends on sports tourism, like Ironman, CSSHL hockey championships, Grand Fondo, which together is like probably $600,000 a year, I would think. So whereas the art gallery, it was arguing over the grant. The eventual grant was $125K plus the extras. But so the argument is, well, the city is vastly underspending on the arts anyway. So what do you think? Is the city vastly underspending on the arts?
What I'm hoping for is we have a report coming to us with the granting cycle. I believe in the next meeting, there was what we passed, I think, at the end there, talking about a partnership, right? And I think it was about a partnership of a lot of things. So like the city, puts money into these big events, and because they draw a lot of people, it's a huge economic driver for it. I'm not saying arts is not, right? I think the Ignite the Arts has the potential to drive that too, right? And so for me, when we look at like those, the money that went into that, like those are big 5-year agreements that we have with those organizations that are bringing in. If you look at like the Canadian Hockey School, we had like buses after buses roll into town for a whole week. Like restaurants were full, right? And the Grand Fondo is looking to really establish a foothold here, right? And so it's about seeing, so the partnership. What I'm hoping for when we move forward is seeing what partnerships that we can make with the Penticton Art Gallery and other arts organizations to establish good art events here in the city, and to be able to do it. Also, too, I understand the argument of seeing that, but I don't want to move away from the fact that, like, I don't want this, like, well, sports is better than art, right? It's, I value art, and I would like to see, investment in that, right? And that's something we're going to look at as council and see what the report comes in with us as well. So, I would like to see, more art happen here in the city of Penticton. I know, being in theater, we really like to try to see more people in our seats when we're having shows and everything like that. And so how do we do that with the partnerships with the organizations that are doing it in the city?
Council recently returned from a big housing forum in the Lower Mainland. 6 members of council, including James Miller, along with 2 city staff members, went to this thing. Everybody who is anybody in BC politics was there, including the premier. So I'm guessing what came out of this, we see these forums, people are talking, but is there action coming out of it?
The big question that came out of that was the legislation that was dropped the day before, where the province announced that legislation is to come out in the fall to basically allow for fourplexes to be built on any residential lot, right? Yeah. And so that was like, okay, well, let's see what the province is going to say, right? I think the most important part that came out of that BC forum was one, having the province there and asking the questions. I got to actually, I went up to the mic and asked the province a tough question in regards to the emergency winter shelters, and they're talking about like what their program is moving forward. And I asked, why, what are you going to do to ensure that we have emergency winter shelters? Why are you not mandating all municipalities to have emergency winter shelters? Yeah. So, like Penticton has an emergency winter shelter, but if no one else does, then everyone comes here. So why not mandate every municipality to have one, give them the resources to run it? Yep. And then also too, what are you going to do to rebuild that relationship up with all the nonprofits who wrote that letter to the province saying that, look, we're under resourced. We don't have the resources. And so to have the top officials there to ask that question and to get them to come with an answer, it's kind of, you had that opportunity to hold their feet to the fire, with all the other municipalities that are there. And what came out of that was a councillor up in Salmon Arm came to talk to me and to, and what we really need to push the province on that. And, to me, that's the point of these forums is one, you're gathering information, but two, you're also building those relationships with other councillors and other staff in other cities. So for example, if we look at Victoria brought in their missing middle initiative. So they're saying 6 plexes on every residential area. And so what they've decided to do is they have 4 floor plans for the developers to kind of say, hey, look, here's what you can build in so you could build tomorrow. Right.
Pre-approved.
Yeah. Very, very similar to the Vancouver special. And that was a lot of talk about, if we're going to have that, the Vancouver special. And so, like I said earlier about talking about protecting character and form. So, we have an OCP task force for housing. It's going to, it'll be interesting to see where that task force goes. But, we look at how we build this housing and we're having fourplexes. Well, that is a perfect opportunity to talk to people about neighborhood charm. We look at neighborhoods and they're saying, hey, we want arts and craft architecture, Art Deco or whatever. Cool. Let's look at what a fourplex looks like in that architecture, have it ready, set for the developer. Hey, you want to build a fourplex? You can build this one here, set, go, that because that Vancouver special allowed it so that if an electrician, a plumber, a carpenter walked in on site with that plan, they knew exactly what to do. Right. And so it just speeds up the process and we can make things look, keep that kind of feel. Right. So you have that information, you're meeting staff. The big thing is, we're coming up here in April at the end of the month. We're going up to the Southern Interior Local Government Association, right? And so you're building relationships with all those other councillors and mayors so that you as a unified voice in the Southern Interior can go to, the United British Columbia municipalities and say, hey, look we need this too, right? We need to address affordable housing. We need to address homelessness. We need to address the opioid crisis. We need to address crime. So you come, if you're going up there by yourself and you're a solo municipality, you don't have that support with all the others, you're not going to get those resolutions forward. You're not going to get that time with the province. So, when you look at that forum, we came back with a lot of great ideas for housing and what other municipalities are doing, but we're also building those relationships with other municipalities as well.
You're gathering allies.
Right? You're gathering allies to bring, because you need the votes, right? One thing, I'm always reminded on council, if you want something, you need 4 votes, right? You need 4 of you to vote for it, right? Same thing with you're going into, SILGA, you're going to UBCM, you need the votes to get those resolutions forward, right? And we have a resolution at SILGA going forward, which is about using city-owned land to get affordable housing on there and have the province match that. So it's about us building those relationships with SILGA to get that passed to go to UBCM and then building those relationships to just basically, come as a unified advocacy for municipalities, right? Because as you see, the province is deciding to, not really listen to municipalities or, take some of the powers away by saying, hey, look you have zoning laws, but now actually those laws, you can have fourplexes now. Right? So that's kind of, the thing that you're going to look at when you're going to these forums, you're building those relationships so that you make sure that you have a strong voice with the province, and you challenge them, but you also work with them, right? You build those partnerships, right? And so, yeah, it was a great event. I learned a lot from a lot of things, and so, yeah, it was a really good event. Came away with a lot, and yeah, I've definitely made some really good connections with other councillors in the Southern Interior.
I want to unpack two of the topics you mentioned there. The first one being that the upzoning for single family lot to fourplexes, like it wouldn't be an understatement to say that's a generational transformation, correct?
Oh yeah,
it's huge.
Well, even so, like that's the kind of like the talk about, even with with the city of Victoria doing the missing middle initiative, sixplexes. Well, where's the lumber coming from? That's there's a lot of questions to it, right? Yeah. Then there's a lot of like, we have to look at it as a municipality, like kind of the logistics around that as well. Like, how do we ensure that we're just not having like, explosion of like, homes, or, not an explosion, but like making sure that homes are, built right and in the right community and designed, well. And so that's where I think we really need to focus on, is like, how do we, move ahead with this legislation that's going to come to us, and do it in a meaningful way for the communities.
You want to get ahead of the curve.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
When does the new legislation take effect?
Well, they said something around like the fall. The fall, they're supposed to put legislation forward to allow fourplexes. Okay. And then, so the other thing with that too is that they're saying province wide, but they might scale it down to certain municipalities, and they said they're going to consult with municipalities, probably at UBCM, because in September UBCM will be coming up for their big convention. So it'll be interesting to see what the province says at that time. Okay. But they might balloon and then scale it down depending on like what kind of pushback they get.
Okay. Right? So it's not set in stone quite yet.
No, not set in stone yet. Okay. It was just announced. So yeah.
Okay. The other thing that you mentioned was you said you talked to them about the winter shelters. On another podcast episode, we talked to Desiree Sarowski from POPs, who ran the shelter this year. We talked about some of the issues they had, but I mean, and with no disrespect to POPs, and I know you were or are involved with them, it was they picked up the pieces. It was chaotic, the system this year. It fell apart. You mentioned the letter, the shelter providers, the past ones said we've had enough of this. So what did you hear from the province? Are they gonna sort this out, or is it going to be groups like POPs who are still pick up the pieces?
Yeah, well, I really hope so that the province, sorts it out, because at the end of the day, winter's coming. Yeah. We know winter's coming, right? So, it's we just really want to see the province be able to sit there and say, look, when it hits this temperature, it's a go, right? We do that with, heat, right? We know heat, we have cooling stations. They pop up. That's very, very clear about, how cooling stations work, right? But emergency winter shelter seems to be the lag where they're like, they're kind of, well, is it that cold? Like, do we really want to implement it? And so, it's tough for, organizations like, POPs to be able to like, revert around so quickly to be able to get those things going and be able to ensure that they have all of the resources that they need as well. Yeah. And so, the province says they're going to review their emergency winter shelter program, and they're going to consult and hopefully build those relationships back. And I'm positive that they will. There's obviously no commitment with it, but they did say, and I do want to be optimistic and give them the benefit of the doubt that I think that they will, really meaningfully look at it and try to rebuild that program. And I think at the end of the day, what I really want, in the municipality is that, like, just give us like, what is the clear, like, I know it's like -10, but like, is it really, and so forth, like, and do they have the resources to manage it, right?
That's all I got for you, Isaac. Any final thoughts? People who want to tune in, who want to get involved, who are interested in talking to you about these issues, what do they do? Should they call you, email you, find you at a council meeting? What?
Yeah, track me down at the council meeting, shackle me down. Yeah, absolutely. You can email if you go on our website, you can send me a web form and give me your contact information. And by all means, I'd be more than willing to sit down and have a coffee with people and talk more about stuff.
It's been a pleasure. We could probably go on for hours.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.